So let's look at one. One says Ghanaians and Nigerians play today. Ghanaians and Nigerians are play today. So we have Ghanaians. How do you spell Ghanaians? G-H-A-N-A. Ghana, when you write Ghana, then you write I-A-N-S. Okay? G-H-A-N-E-I-A-N-S. G-H-A-N-A-I-A-N-S. Ghanaians. Okay? It's not Ghananians. It's Ghanaians. Okay? That's the correct pronunciation. Ghanaians. Okay? So there we have Ghanaians and Nigerians play today. So under that structure, you underline Ghanaians. And when you underline Ghanaians, you point your arrow downward to the second line, the third line, you write your S2. So we have our Ghanaians as our S2, okay? And we have Nigerians, okay? Under that, so you underline Nigerians. When you underline Nigerians, you point your arrow downward to the second line, the third line, you write your S2. So we have S2 and S2 there. And we have the structure play today. So you underline play. When you underline play, you point your arrow downward to the second line, the third line, you write your V2. So we have play as our V2, okay? It is therefore wrong when you say Ghanaians and Nigerians are plays today. If you say that, it means your S2 and S2 have taken V1, and that is wrong, okay? So the correct form remains Ghanaians and Nigerians play today. On the other hand, you can briefly say they play today. If you say that, it means you have taken the third person plural pronoun, and it has agreed with play, which is third person plural verb. So that is correct, okay? So we go to our example 2. Example 2 says, banks and schools close today. Banks and schools close today, okay? Banks and schools close today. So under that structure, you underline banks. When you underline banks, you point your arrow downward to the second and the third line, you write your S2. So your banks as our S2. And then we have schools. You underline schools as well. When you underline schools, you point your arrow downward to the second line, the third line, you write your S2. So you have schools as another S2. So we have S2 and S2 there. And we have the structure close today. So under that structure, you underline close. When you underline close, you point your arrow downward in the second line. In the third line, you write your V2. So we have close as our V2. So you can see that there S2 and S2 have taken V2, okay, which is correct. It is therefore wrong when you say banks and schools are closes today. If you say that, it means your S2 and S2 have taken V1, and that is wrong, okay? So the correct form remains banks and schools are closed today. On the other hand, you can briefly say they close today. If you say that, it means you've taken the third person plural pronoun, and it has agreed with close, okay? So that is right. And then we go to our example 3, okay? Example 3 says, the boys and the girls are her children. The boys and the girls are her children. So under that structure, you underline boys. When you underline boys, you point your arrow downward in the second and the third line, you write your S2. So we have boys as our S2 there. And then we have girls too. When you underline girls, when you underline girls, you point your arrow downward in the second and the third line, you write your S2. So we have girls as another S2, okay? So we have boys S2, you have girls as S2. And then we have the structure her children. So under that structure, you underline R. When you underline R, you point your arrow downward in the second line, the third line, you write your V2. So we have R as our V2, okay? So there we have S2 and S2 have taken V2, and that is correct. It is therefore wrong when you say the boys and the girls is her children. If you say that, it means your S2 and S2 have taken V1, and that is wrong. So the correct form remains the boys and the girls are her children. On the other hand, you can briefly say they are her children. If you say that, if you say that, it means you've taken the third person plural pronoun, and it has agreed with are, which is a plural auxiliary verb. So from there, we go to example 4. Example 4 says the states and the local governments have reached an agreement. Okay, the states and the local governments have reached an agreement. Okay, the states and the local governments have reached an agreement. So under that structure, you underline states. When you underline states, you point your arrow downward in the second line, the third line, write your S2. So we have states as our S2 there. And then we have a local governments. So you underline local governments, and when you underline local governments, you point your arrow downward in the second line, the third line, write your S2. So we have states, S2, local governments, S2, okay? And then we have the structure, have reached an agreement. So under that structure, you underline have. When you underline have, you point your arrow downward in the second line, the third line, write your V2. So we have as our V2, okay? It is therefore wrong when you say the states and the local governments has reached an agreement. If you say that, it means your S2 and S2 have taken V1, which is has. Has is wrong there. So, on the other hand, you can say, so the correct form remains the states and the local governments have reached an agreement. Okay. On the other hand, you can briefly say they have reached an agreement. If you say that, it means your S2, it means you have taken the third person plural pronoun and it has agreed with have, which is a plural auxiliary verb. Okay. So we go to our example. You go to example. We'll go to example. Okay, that's the end of the first 4. Okay, so we go on we observe our 2 seconds break, and when we return, we pick 5, 6, 7, and 8 all together. All right.